Welcome to Discover with Andre Luna. I'm Andre, and this is our very first episode of what we hope will be a great series that's going to be an in-depth look on different cultures and different traditions and the discovery of roots and self-discovery of your own self. With me today, my very first but very special guest, the co-founder of Game Day, the co-director of Black Student Assembly at USC, a member of the USC Spirit Leaders, and innovative entrepreneur, activist, leader, and all-around great guy, Kristian Emel.
I appreciate you, man.
How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I really thank you for being a part of this show. It's been a long time coming, and I'm just glad that I have you for my first guest.
Yeah, no, I really thank you for bringing me on.
No problem. All right. Oh, I forgot he's from LA. Gotta check that out.
LA, let's go.
Missed that part. So Kristian, you came back from Ghana to commemorate the 400th year of slavery. And that journey of self-discovery is one of the reasons I wanted to have you be the first person on this show to understand how important and vital that discovery has become to your life and now and in the future. I understand that immediately following the conclusion of your journey, you were given a Ghanaian or an African name,
right?
And which you put on your social media bio right afterwards, and then you made a story to highlight it. So really just talk to us and describe your journey and your self-discovery.
Yeah, man. My mom told me maybe about last year or the beginning of this year that we were going to Ghana, and I had no idea what to expect. I've been to other parts of Africa. I've been to Egypt. I've been to South Africa, and those trips were valuable and eye-opening, but I expected something different from Ghana, knowing that a lot of the African diaspora was rooted in West Africa and countries like Ghana, Nigeria, surrounding countries. And so I kind of went in with a mindset of being open to a new identity, being open to finding out who I was, where I come from, where I get my culture from, where I get my features from, and ultimately where my identity stems from.
Wow.
So having gone on the trip, we have a lot to talk about, man. We have a lot to talk about.
That's okay, man. We can talk about it in different parts.
Cool.
Really, let's get to the roots of it, man. A lot of people, it's not bad to say that you have a big following, not only in this school, but on social media. A lot of people saw your trip because it was really well documented. I myself made sure I watched every clip so I could become a little bit more educated because of the knowledge you were getting. A lot of people saw what you did and were inspired to kind of like do the same. Maybe they can't afford or they can't, have the time to do the African trip that you did.
Right.
But some people are willing to do that now.
Right.
But they're also like looking up, I guess, like the history of it and trying to find out more about who they are.
Right.
Hearing about that, do you think that you would try to like maybe like like what you're doing right now, like be more willing to spread your knowledge about what you experienced there?
No, I definitely want all the exposure as possible. I remember actually coming back from one of the tours one day, sitting in the bus thinking about how badly I wanted to write a book about the experience, how badly I wanted to document it so that people could see it and learn and enjoy, but really be able to resonate with what I was going through. I know that people really can't, like you mentioned, afford to take that trip, or don't have the resources right now to do so, the time, the family situation to do that.
Of course.
But I want people to understand the significance and the impact and the wealth of knowledge that lies in Ghana and in West Africa, and really be able to experience it secondhand until they could go take the trip for themselves. Whether that's through a book, podcast, movie, Instagram stories, etc. Whatever way is best for them to take in the information. I just want to make sure that they actually have access to it.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I can already tell we'll buy the first book.
I appreciate that.
Would the book be about identity?
Yeah, it would be, right now I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of big on motivating people and inspiring others. So it would be a book that ties in the situation of how, I got here. Slavery, the stealing of people away from the West Coast, Ivory Coast, tying that in to how we can take that struggle and take history and turn it into motivation to be better and do better today. A big part of what I want to do now, even when I was still there, was enlighten people, educate people, bring back the knowledge that I was gaining to people in the U.S. I feel like so many lives would change. The way that people interact with each other, the way that people carry themselves would change if they only knew where they came from, like where they started. I like when I was over there, I immediately thought, you know what? If people who engaged in violence, if people who joined certain groups that engaged in violence could go over to Africa, observe the culture. Ghana is an extremely peaceful country, relatively peaceful country. West Africa is relatively peaceful. There's violence everywhere, there's crime everywhere. But in Ghana, people are outside walking the streets at nighttime. People are out with their families at nighttime. There are no guns. People aren't shooting each other down. People aren't shooting up, malls. People aren't shooting up grocery stores. People are family. I was walking around, people are coming up to me saying, welcome to Ghana, welcome home, welcome back, family. Obviously, it looked like a tourist, looked like American, but the fact that that's how they'd engage you, as someone who you've never met or seen before, hi, welcome back. If people could go over there and experience that, things would be different. So by writing a book and containing that knowledge in a place where not only can I go back and refer to it later, but where people can delve into a deeper understanding of where they come from and what Africa has to offer, I think will be extremely beneficial to not only me, to not only people from the African diaspora, but to everyone who doesn't have the authentic, correct history of West Africa.
Couple things, just in case anyone's not familiar with the term African diaspora is the people that were taken from Africa to other places.
People and their descendants, yes.
Okay. And another thing, it sounds like you were very much impacted by this trip, and you feel like if everyone else had this experience, then they would be impacted well enough too. Yeah. You did receive a name, right?
I did.
What was that name that you received?
I was renamed, re-identified, rebranded, man. And this was a part of the trip that I was excited about, very excited about. I was eager to take on my original identity, not my new identity, my original identity, who I would have been had I been born in Africa. My original identity. And so when it came time for the naming ceremony and I was sitting face to face with the paramount chief who was to name me and to give me my certificate of being renamed, like my new birth certificate, all I could think about was being kind of like in Christianity, baptism, being reborn.
Yeah, reborn, yeah.
And as soon as I got my name, I immediately went on Instagram. I put all these stories about my new name, my certificate.
What it means.
I even changed my name in my Instagram biography, which to people who don't understand Instagram, that's a big deal. That's your Instagram bio. That's your name to the rest of the world. My name on Instagram was Kristian Emel. Lee was my birth name, my middle name given at birth through my family lineage. Now it's Kristian Kwesi Lee Emel. I hyphenated my middle name. Kwesi is my name in Ghana. The name Kwesi is the Ghanaian word for Sunday. Sunday was the day that I was born on. In Ghana, my name is Nana Kwamina Ansa, who was the chief who founded the city in which I was named in. And so I was named after the person who founded the city in which I received my name and the family where I got my name from. Because the people who named me perceived me without knowing me, perceived that I was innovative, creative, and that I would forge my own path. Which is ridiculous because they
didn't know you.
If I've never met you before, let alone seen you, and I come up with a name for you that, or name me after someone who matches your traits or what you think of yourself, word for word, for trait, that's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
But it also speaks to the amount of spiritualism, how spiritual people in Ghana are, how spiritual people in Africa are, and the way that almost everything they do is something to do with spiritual realm and with the power and a force greater than themselves.
Of course. And hearing that and then realizing that before this trip you didn't have that connection because you weren't aware of it, right?
Correct.
Now that you know it, do you feel empowered in a certain way? You know, like knowing that people from Ghana or West Africa are very spiritual, and now that you have that connection because of that name, because of your experience, because of everything that you've learned, don't you feel like you might be like changed in a little way, or do you feel like you're the same person?
No, definitely same person, just different. You know what, man, you could even say that I'm changed, actually, just because after having been around the people, not only are they spiritual, they're also very much family oriented. Everything's a family. It doesn't matter who your mother is, doesn't matter who your father is, everyone's brother and sister, everyone's family. Walk down the street, get dapped up by anyone, doesn't matter if they know you or not, everyone's family. Very peaceful, very kind, smiling, waving at you, family. And so after having been around that, it kind of changes my mind on how I see the world, the way that I walk, the way that I approach other people. In situations where I might have felt offended or where I might have felt intense situations where confrontation might have been the apparent answer, I'm not confrontational to begin with. But after having been in that environment, it really takes away the significance of confrontation. Why fight? Why step up to someone? It really emphasizes the empathy, the respect, and the family attitude of being able to treat everyone like they're your family, whether you know them or not, whether they look like you or not, being able to treat everyone with that respect and that care.
Yeah, I mean, knowing from like my community, family is above everything else, you know, so having that family dynamic with people you don't even know sounds amazing to me. So what would you have considered your roots pre-trip, and what would you consider them post? I mean, I feel like we've talked a lot about how your roots have made you who you are now, but before knowing all that, like, what would you say, like, when someone asks you, like, where are you from, what would you say?
This is a really tough question for me and for a lot of people that are from the African diaspora.
Of course.
Because before the trip, I didn't know
a lot of
where I was from. I just knew that I was from Africa. And I might have told you America, I might have told you Africa, I might have told you West Africa, but I didn't know. And so, and even to this day, I still haven't really taken the DNA test to know exactly what African country I'm from. But I know, not necessarily where I'm from in location, but I know where I'm from. After having been around my people, the Ghanaians, my people, and having been able to experience, to observe, to immerse myself, I know where I'm from. And that's enough for right now. I may never know exactly what country I'm from, what city or town, where my great grandmother, grandfather came from, but having at least a connection to Ghana for now is more than enough.
Man, that sounds really amazing to hear. You know, my other question would be, who was Kristian Emel and who is the new Kristian Emel?
Yeah, man. I guess pre-trip Kristian Emel was someone who, I'll say this, the Kristian Emel before the trip and the Kristian Emel after the trip are involved in the same activities, know the same people, has the same schedule, but it's the knowing that's different, the wiring that's different now, the identity, the sense of belonging, the strength, knowing what my ancestors endured, knowing what they went through, knowing where we came from, that Ghana was a place, and still is a place of resources, of gold, of power, of sovereignty, of respect, of values. That's where I come from.
That's where you come from.
People, rich, crawling with riches. That's why the Europeans went there in the first place. That's why other nations go there in the first place. Africa is full of resources. The African kingdoms that you learn about in history, that they briefly cover, the Egyptians, even the Mali Empire, the kingdom's teeming with gold and all of these elements and riches and money and wealth and affluence and knowledge. Timbuktu, the center of knowledge, the center of education. That's where I come from.
That's where you come from.
The first civilization. And so being able to have been tied back into that, understanding that component that, hey, I don't come from huts and poverty and starvation and 10 cents a day saves a child in need. No, I come from a place of gold and kings and queens and wealth and knowledge and affluence and power. That's where I come from. Yeah. And so now I could walk around Los Angeles, I could walk around USC knowing where I come from, knowing who I'm called to be, and knowing that the people who came before me, some of whom who died, some of those who almost died, some of those who kept enduring, had a bigger purpose. And that bigger purpose now lives on through me. Any one of my ancestors could have died along the way and I would not have been here. No one really talks about how much death and despair occurred along the way of slavery. You only know about slavery as people who were sold and shipped across the sea, and then they came in, they worked on plantations day in and day and night. Those people were tortured, beaten, killed, punished for hundreds of miles, hundreds of hours, hundreds of years. Here's the thing about it. Something that we learned while I was over there is that, no, it didn't just start on the ships. Slavery didn't start on the ships. Those people were stolen from their homeland. Slavery was seen and manipulated to be a kind act. See, slavery did exist in Africa, but slaves in Africa could have property. They could own property. They could have lives. They had rights. People had rights. So when the Europeans came along talking about slavery, they presented it like it was, oh, we just need some workers to go over here and help us out with our project over here in the west part of the world. And knowing that the Africans thought slavery to be an institution that wasn't as cruel and unjust as what the Europeans were intending to do, they sold people into slavery, as well as the Europeans stealing people into the night, literally going to meetings with chiefs and people saying, oh, you know what, we appreciate you for welcoming us to Africa, now let us do the same and welcome you to our boat or welcome you to our land. And instead of taking those people back to Europe like they told them they would take them over across the ocean, right? So slavery was not only a physical thing, it was a mental thing. You think you're going to Rome or to Paris to meet with the king or queen of Europe like the Europeans promised you, but you wake up in your shack when you're on your way to North America, South America, with 3 dead bodies around you from people who couldn't make the trip. With someone above you who has sickness, who's vomiting, who's urinating, who has feces coming out of them because they can't hold the seasickness that they have. People who had to walk 300 miles just to take a bath, right, in a river where they couldn't even wash themselves. They were being hung from bamboo while the slave masters were washing them down with other sticks of bamboo, literally tearing their skin off. Once you're supposedly clean and sold to someone else, you have to walk another 40, 50 miles just to get to a dungeon where you were held for another 3 weeks to a year to 2 years before you eventually made it to the ship. And all along the way, people were being killed left and right. If you walked too fast, you were killed. If you walked too slow, you were killed. If you had the wrong attitude, if you were aggressive, you were killed. If there were lions, they walked through forests, through deserts, through all types of different environments. If there were wild animals chasing you, they would take people apart of the chain link. They would tie people together. They'd take people out of line and tie them to trees, tie them to the ground so that the animals wouldn't chase the whole pack and would stop and eat the people that were left behind. There was death every part of the way before the ships. And so to know that my ancestors, the people that made it possible for me to be here, got through all of that, through the animals, through the 300 miles, through the weather conditions, through the forest, through the desert, through the threat of being killed. If I said something, if I tried to get away, not only would I be killed, but the person next to me could be killed. The person down the line from me could be killed, as an example. So the fact that my ancestors got here through all of that, through making it through the bath, through being sold, through making it across the sea, they were throwing people off those boats. The most heavily, not even heavily documented, but the thing that came to mind that they taught us was that on one of the ships, they threw 133 people overboard. 133 people overboard on the way to America. And so you think that you made it through that journey of walking, 300 miles, 400 miles, that you made it through the bath, that you made it onto this boat. Now you have to eat the slop that they give you. Now you're seasick. Now you have to hope that they don't throw you off the ship. So, you made it across the ocean, right? You didn't get thrown off the ship. You didn't die from seasickness. You didn't die from a disease. You didn't die from being killed. Now you make it to America. Now you're expected to work day in and day out for someone you don't know, with people that you don't know. Your wife, your children is being sold to another plantation. You're being separated from your family yet again. You could be killed again if for the wrong attitude. You could be killed again as an example. You can be shipped somewhere else. You could try to escape and be killed, be locked up, right? Your wife could be raped by the slave owner. You could be made to fight another slave to death for entertainment. Mandingo warriors making the slaves fight against each other to death for entertainment, right? So, and this is just a slavery part of it, right? And that's not even the full extent. This is what we know, what came to mind.
What you were told,
What I was told. So there's a lot of slavery that's not documented. Slavery is not taught by the people that were enslaved. Slavery is taught by, history is taught by the winner, correct? And so slavery in America, slavery in Europe, slavery in Africa, even in Ghana, is taught from the perspective of the Europeans. The Europeans control the narrative of slavery in the US, in Europe, and in Ghana. They don't teach the full extent of slavery in Ghana until you make it to college. So even growing up in Africa, you can't learn about the full extent of your history. You can't learn about what your people went through. And I know that's a really long-winded answer to your question, but
I think it was needed to be said, man.
The end point is that my ancestors went, endured, fought through all of that death, violence, despair, so that I could be here.
A lot of people forget. I'm also going to apologize for having little to no reaction to what he was saying. All that he described was stuff that he had put on his story beforehand, and
man,
I'm not gonna lie, man. I had a couple of tears every time I saw what you put on there, because a lot of people, even outside Africa and Latin America, had to go through what this was, and just hearing about what your ancestors had to do for you to be here is monumental. And once I heard that story, I was, damn, thank you for them, because not only are you here, but you're still continuing the message.
Man,
thank them,
man.
But wow. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about narrative, really, because one thing I did notice that you said before and in your story was that in Ghana they don't tell the children the history because they're afraid that it will teach them to hate towards other people. And even though this is the 400th year since slavery started, we're still feeling the effects of it today. Do you think if, the knowledge that you have received was partaked, say in our school system or something like that, or in Germany, they recognize what their, government did in the 1940s to make sure that it doesn't happen again, knowing that, what would you look for a future America to include?
America has a long way to go, man.
Of course.
First of all, people need to understand and accept the full message, the full history. It's not about a narrative. It's not about individual interpretation. It's about what happened. What happened. I think if people understood what happened, that we'd have a lot less issues with race and race relations, understanding each other. You could understand someone if you knew what their ancestors went through. Black people could understand themselves better and what makes them unique if they understood what their people came through. I think a lot of violence would end if people understood that the only reason that they're here is because someone went through something so severe. And so,
motivating force.
Even with the current political cycle, people talking about reparations. A lot of the political candidates are talking about how do we give the African American community, how do we settle what happened? Is there a dollar amount that we should give African Americans? Is there programs we should have for African Americans? What should we do for African Americans? And to be honest, I don't have a ready-to-go input on that debate, but I do know for a fact that if reparations are to be talked about, that they should not even try to touch the conversation until they have the full history. You can't start to pay someone back for something until you know exactly the extent of what happened.
Exactly.
Right?
I agree.
I can't go to pay you back for, you know, stepping on your shoes if I don't know that as a result of me stepping on your shoes, you couldn't attend an event, a shoe modeling event, which caused you to lose out on a paycheck because you're supposed to model an event with those shoes, and that, you know, you're also supposed to give those shoes to your nephew for his birthday as an autographed gift. And now there's, you know, 3 different parts. And I don't mean to compare slavery to shoes, but knowing the full extent of the grievance. I hope that nothing comes out of those reparations until people know exactly what you're paying people back for.
Of course. Okay, well, this kind of like plays into it. I understand you learned a lot of things that many people in the West, like myself, who are taught from a Eurocentric viewpoint, don't know about history/culture. I mean, you talked a little bit more about, like, I guess, like the slave, not the adventure, I guess, like the slave, how would you describe it, the slave
trade?
The slave journey, you know, where they started off from here. And there's like a lot of things that, you know, me and most of the people that are probably watching this have no clue about, or some things you would want our audience to know specifically.
If you're listening to this, you should understand that the reason why you may be here is because of the sacrifice that people went through, alive and passed away. To the people that couldn't make the journey, who passed away along the way, to the people who did make the journey.
Yeah.
The reason that we're here is off their sacrifice. That goes for black people, that goes for white people, that goes for people who enjoy the America of today, for Latino people, Latina people, some of whom also are descendants of those same slaves who made it to Brazil. The largest population of the enslaved went to Latin countries in Latin America. And so there are some, you know, identities to be explored there. But
Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino.
Exactly. And so the appreciation, to appreciate, America was built on the backs of those who came here. The South was built on the backs of those enslaved Africans. And so whether you're white or black, you still owe appreciation to them for going through that, right?
Yeah.
If you're black, owing the appreciation to those who made it on your behalf for you to be here, for those who didn't make it. If you're white, paying appreciation to those who made it here and people who didn't make it here. Even if you had nothing to do, even if your ancestors did not have anything to do with the slave trade, even if your ancestors were involved in the slave trade, the fact that the America that you enjoy, the country that you enjoy, the privileges that you can enjoy would not be here, would not be the same if it weren't for those same Africans who are stolen from the motherland and brought here.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, they would have taken some other people. Nah. And even if you want to entertain the idea that, oh, we didn't need black people, we could have just gone and got other people and done to them. No. The reason why they got Africans and brought them to America is because the people that they tried to use originally, which were the Native Americans, were dying at a really high rate and couldn't handle the labor that they were giving them. So they were already killing off Native Americans trying to do that labor. And then they went to Africa and got those people. And on that point, also paying respect and appreciating the Native Americans who didn't make it either. And so there are a lot of shared struggles, a lot of shared history, shared losses in terms of what happened throughout slavery. The cause of it, the effect of it, the aftermath of it, all of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation, because I feel like a lot of people, you know, when they hear this sacrifice that, you know, you people went through, can really have more appreciation and be more motivated to do things, you know?
Man, we have no choice. We have no choice.
Like, for like myself, I can speak on, like, you know, it's obviously minuscule compared to what, you know, what you're going through, but, you know, when I hear about what my grandparents, what my parents did to give me where I'm at right now, I'm always super appreciative, and that's the only reason I claim any success I have is because of their sacrifices. So just imagine, like, the sacrifice that they went through, you know?
Yeah.
Like, people forget that life is not a guarantee sometimes.
Not at all.
And, you know, it's got beauty in all places. And I feel like, you know, this story of, you know, self-discovery is gonna will impact a lot of people to discover themselves and find that same amount of connection, influence, and that like you said, like that power of knowing that I don't come from what's it called, villages that need 10 cents a day to survive. I come from a land of resources. I come from a land of kings, queens, all of that. You know, really what I wanted to ask was, you know, there's an idea of Africa in this country. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure there's an idea of America in that country. Mm-hmm. What would you say was the idea of Africa before you went to Africa, even before you went to these other trips? And what was the idea of Africa after?
Man, I'm so glad you asked that question. That's a huge component of the trip. Going to Africa, you know, in media, in commercials, even in schools, all they really tell you about Africa is that, you know, back in the centuries, you know, they had kingdoms and blah blah blah, but they never really talk about it today. All they talk about, you know, all you hear about is African poverty, children starving, safaris, lions, wild animals, wild goats. That's all you hear about. You don't really hear about the wealth that exists over there. So I went in not really knowing what to expect. Let me tell you, when I landed at the airport in Ghana, that airport is nicer than the LAX. Moving to Africa and struggling, people don't realize that. People think moving to Africa is like, whoa, what about America? People already have Lamborghinis and Maseratis and nice cars in Africa. People already have beach resorts and beach homes in Africa. People already have the life that we drive and strive for here in Africa. It's entirely possible. Ghana is the #1 growing economy in the world. You could create that same success in America that you can do it in Ghana. It will be different, but it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen anywhere.
I encourage people to go. Ghana is beautiful. They have cars, they have homes, they have electricity, they have clean water, they have food, they have cell phones and signals, they have internet. So go, see it for yourself. I wish that they wouldn't teach it the way it is. That's why I want to talk about it now. I hope everyone hears this message. Go to Africa. Go, see for yourself.
I hope they hear this message too, so they can watch the show.
Of course, man.
You know, hearing about that and kind of like getting this new kind of like viewpoint in the world, looking at America, what do you think are some of the things that we need to fix immediately?
Don't get me started, man.
We can just skip it then if you want.
Don't get me started on America. Man, yeah, let me skip that. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, let's not talk about it. Let's keep it to what it's about. Yeah. Discovery, right? And discovering one's roots and how that plays a part. So, you mentioned it already. Ghanans are very, very spiritual people. What are something else that's very specific or unique about your culture that you would want to highlight to our audience? You know, obviously go visit Ghana first, but, you know.
Of course. Yeah, no, we're very resilient people.
I can tell.
We're very resilient, we're very creative, we're very artistic people. A lot of craftsmen and women with beautiful paintings, beautiful carvings, statues, beautiful bands and jewelry and necklaces. Very artistic, very creative people. Very resilient, very strong, very giving people. Quick to give, provide. Nurturing, the family aspect of it, right? Those same traits carry over to America. I would say that African Americans carry a lot of the same traits, despite what you might see in the media, despite what you might see on social media. The black community is very nurturing towards one another. As far as, you know, even walking down the street, seeing other black people in America, you give them a nod, you say hello, how you doing? A very strong sense of community. And so, as far as American culture goes, as far as African culture goes, I'd say that a lot of things in common. But the one thing that people should know is that we come from a place of pride. We come from a place of power. We come from a place of respect. We come from a place of humility. And I know you might be thinking, how can you have pride and humility? How can you have humility and power. Now we come from a place where we have power. We have pride for who we are, for what we do, but we still respect each other. We still respect the outsider. We still respect others and welcome others in with open arms. And so, as black person existing in America at a school, at a PWI, with other people that don't look like me, and being able to have the connections and the network and the friends with a variety of different people, as a person who's able to still take pride in who I am, yet still remain open to connections with others, I think that's a huge part of my culture, and I think that's something that everyone should know about.
Sounds great, man. So let's finish on a high note.
Yeah, of course.
So what's next for you? What do you have in store?
Yeah, man, I'm glad you asked. I'm actually, I just launched a company that I'm starting. It's Game Day Co., better yet known as Game Day. Game Day is founded on the principles of making every day better than the previous day. Bringing out the best version of yourself every day. Kind of even tying it into the trip, how, after understanding and learning what our ancestors went through, and how much struggle and how much death and despair that they endured, that now I have no choice but to be successful because they went through all of that. It's Game Day emphasizes having no choice but to be the best version of yourself, because you never know how many more days you'll have. Every day is not guaranteed. And so it's Game Day really focuses on the athlete mentality. The athlete mentality being on a game day, as someone who, I played basketball. You mentioned you played soccer yesterday when we talked. You played a little bit of soccer, you played basketball. On a game day, you're ready to compete, you're focused, you're in the zone. You're ready to win. So taking in that same winning attitude, the same focus, the same drive into every day, making every day the game day. You can really be the best version of yourself. And having the community. You know how, you go to a football game, you got fans from all over the world cheering on for the same team. Even if they're not going for the same team, you still, have that elbow bumping camaraderie, the community, right? Having a game day community, having your fan base. And so, moving forward, really just building Game Day out, building the Game Day community. What I'm doing is I'm working with the productivity tool. So the productivity tool is the clothing. So the same way I'm wearing this Game Day sweatshirt, it's synonymous to how a basketball player wears his basketball uniform. You wouldn't expect to see LeBron James walking down the street in full Lakers uniform. And now he's only suited up and he's ready to compete. And he's ready to put on the game face when he's ready to perform. So the same way you put on your Game Day gear when you're ready to compete with yourself, to bring out the best version of yourself, when you're ready to be productive, when you're ready to attack a goal. So that's what I'll be doing, building up these Game Day tools, sending them out to people so that they can really attack their goals, so they can really attack the best version of themselves, and then building that community so that I can see you accomplishing something. I can see you building up your television show, building up your podcast, and I can say, hey, I really appreciate the grind and the hustle. I'm going to support you. I'm going to root you on, and so is this other person who's building something completely different, but still appreciates the fact that you're putting an investment into becoming a better version of yourself. So that's what I'll be doing.
So I'll be expecting my shirt or my hoodie soon, right?
Of course, man.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. And, I just want to thank you so much. When I saw your stories, and knowing the kind of person you are, like you said, even though I don't have that spiritual connection with you like they had over there, I could tell you from as soon as I met you that you had those traits.
Thank you, man.
You would be one of the best guests to start the show and kick it off in the right direction.
Man.
And so,
thank you.
That's Kristian Emel, and that is The Truth Within. I would like to say special thanks to Kristian for taking a minute out of his busy day.
Yeah, of course.
To be able to speak about not only his tradition, but his history. And also thanks to my boy, Brian Chen, behind the camera, executive producer.
Oh, baby.
He's coming more. Don't worry, if you don't want him anymore, he's going to be here, all right? And then thank you all for watching. This is going to be a weekly series, and I hope that we can, just discover more about other people, other culture, but discover more about ourselves. So that's what the purpose of the show is, and I'd like to thank you one more time, and until next week, thank you.
All right.
All right, bro. Let's
Good
get that
stuff, man.
Let's get a picture real quick.